been a delay in some officers getting on the call today, and that's because of the announcements that just came out half an hour ago about the tiered system. So if you could bear with me just a minute or two and then we'll get started. It's gone by 1 o'clock, so thank you very much everyone for coming to the virtual special meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny panel today. We usually have papers in relation to the annual accounts and also the external auditors report, usually late summer, usually in September, but obviously because of the world that we're living in just now, it has been delayed ever so slightly, so apologies for that, but unfortunately it has been completely out with our control. You'll see here from the agenda today that it is specifically on those topics, and if I could relate just straight away to the agenda in terms of declarations of interest. Actually, sorry, before we do that, Andrew, have we got any apologies today?
Yes, Convener. The only apology I've received so far is from Councillor Morgan. That's
great. Thank you very much. Do we have any other apologies from any other members? Councillor Anderson?
It's a declaration. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Sorry, that was my fault. I'm confusing everyone. I do apologise. So if we, Fiona?
I believe Elaine Kemp's not going to be able to make it. Gold has been rescheduled, so I think she's going to be on that call and possibly joining us in half an hour or so.
That's great, Fiona. I was going to get onto that in a second, because there has been a few officers delayed because of the announcements today by the First Minister and the Scottish Government. So I believe Elaine has been caught up in those discussions. So thank you very much, Fiona, and also Veronica for stepping in. And I'm assuming you'll be able to speak to the reports that Elaine was going to. So I thank you both for that. If we can move on to the agenda now, and agenda item 1 is declarations of interest. Councillor Anderson, I see that you were looking to get in there.
Yes, husband works for mayors, but it doesn't preclude me from taking part.
That's great. I also have a declaration of interest as a member of the IJB board, but again, it doesn't preclude me from taking part in any discussions today. Do we have any further declarations of interest at all? Fiona?
Sorry, not a declaration, but Veronica Roberts is having trouble getting on to the WebEx meeting. She thinks it's to do with Office 365. She is intending to be here, but she's just struggling to actually get logged on.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me know. Fiona, are you able to take the reports that Veronica was going to take, or would that?
I guess I'll just have to. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much for stepping in there. Really appreciate it.
Apologies.
Megan, because it's mentioned the municipal bank, I think Sandy and I should declare an interest, but it's very insignificant, so it won't stop us from taking part.
I appreciate that, Councillor Hume. Councillor Watson, are you looking to declare on that item?
Yeah, well, I think so. Jim's declaring, I'll just declare too, and also on the board of Fusion Assets, but I don't know whether, I don't think that precludes me from sitting in the meeting here.
That's great. Thank you very much, everyone. Do you have any other declarations of interest from members?
Convener, can I just check that the members who've declared interest they're across the board for all agenda items rather than any one specific agenda item? I'm assuming. I believe
so. I believe so, because there are, different aspects of the reports where things will be mentioned in. So I think we'd be there all day trying to pinpoint exactly the sections of the reports where people need to declare. So if we could just do it across the board, that would be great. Thank you very much. Okay, so as I said before, the agenda items today relate to the annual audit reports and also the report from Audit Scotland. So they'll be the reports that we're focusing on today. Audit and Scrutiny members will have had the chance to read the unaudited reports before coming to today's committee, so you will have had a chance to read these before, but obviously there are changes that are made prior to today's meeting too. So if we could move on to agenda item 2, please, which is the annual accounts 2019-2020, which is the letter of representation. That's pages 5 to 14. Members will be familiar with this format, and it shows the letter of representation provided to Audit Scotland. It would normally be Elaine who's taking the agenda item, but Fiona, if you're able to step in, I'd greatly appreciate that. If you've got any comments to make to the report, Thank you.
I do. I'm afraid I'm going to appear like I'm reading it a bit because Veronica sent me her notes. I hadn't prepared to be presenting this, but I'm aware of everything that's in it anyway. So good afternoon. The first paper on the agenda is the annual accounts 1920 letters of representation. This report asks panel members to note the letters of representation that we provided to Audit Scotland following this meeting. The letter of representation covers both the Council and the Charitable Trust Educational Trust, for which we're trustee for. The letter sets out the representations of management and confirms that the accounts presented here today are free from material misstatement. The letter of representation is provided as an appendix and remains largely unchanged from previous years. However, reference is made to the COVID-19 situation. That's me. Short and sweet.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Do we have any comments or questions regarding agenda item 2? No, I don't see any hands and I don't see any comments in the chat bar. Are members therefore happy to note the paper? Thank you very much. I'll take the silence as an agreement there. Thank you very much. If we could move on to agenda item 3, which is the annual accounts 2019-2020, and it's the external auditor's report to those charged with governance on the 2019-2020 audit. We always enjoy hearing from our external auditors, Audit Scotland, Carol. So thank you very much, Carol, for being on our meeting again today. And Carol, if I could pass over to yourself, please, if you would like to highlight any points within the report.
Thanks, convener, and I'm happy to be here. I also want to start with thanks to the panel for accommodating this additional date. It became fairly obvious early on in the dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic that delivering to the end of September would have been particularly challenging, and it would have put a significant burden on finance staff, but also on the audit team. So I just wanted to thank the panel for being accommodating and arranging this additional date. I might jump about a little bit at the moment, if that's okay, because I think it's easier if I start with the charitable trusts and then I can close them off. So the covering letter for the charitable trusts is on page 28 to 34 of the agenda. Unmodified audit opinions and the independent auditor's report for both the trusts. We don't have any issues that we would like to draw to your attention in relation to the audit and standards for these audits. As you'll be familiar, I always look at this point for a bit of confirmation, the Audit and Scrutiny panel, that there are no instances of actual suspected or alleged fraud or any events that I should be made aware of as the external auditor, or any areas of non-compliance with laws and regulations that the panel might be aware of. So similar to yourself, convener, I will pause and I will take silence as that there are no issues that anyone would like to draw to my attention. So slight pause. All good. So I'm not expecting anything, so that's good.
That's the wedding moment, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is.
Carol, Carol, it's Jim here. I'm sorry. Which agenda item was that? Have you moved forward a bit, or?
So it's Appendix 2, so it's on page 28 of the agenda pack.
Right. So that's item 3. That's item 3 then, yeah.
Yeah, we're on item 3.
I just had a query on that. I think it's just standard text. But in light of my question about material misstatements, on page 21 of that, it says risks of material misstatement, and it says I report in a separate annual audit report available from Audit Scotland website the most significant assessed risks. So I guess there's nothing on the Audit Scotland website, since there was no material misstatements recorded in the account. Well, apart from one, but nothing significant for the accounts. Is that right? Is that just a standard text that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything there?
So page 21 is the council's. Let me get to page 21. Yeah, so that's why I said I am jumping about a little bit, so I will go back to that, I promise.
Right.
I felt it was easier to kind of close off the trusts first.
That's
So
fine, yeah, okay.
bear with me slightly, and hopefully all will become clearer. So in terms of the trusts, if Fiona mentioned the letters of representation, there's nothing within them that I would draw to your attention, and that's really all for the trusts. So if we now go back to page 18, and again, apologies for this, but it might not feel easier at the moment, but I think it is. So before I go into any detail, I was just going to explain what an emphasis of matter paragraph was. You'll see that it features throughout, a lot of the kind of report this year. It's important to say that the opinion for the council is unqualified, it's not modified. An emphasis of matter paragraph is something that the auditing standards permit the auditor to use where they want to draw the users of the account's attention to a specific area. They're quite common in the private sector, but they're fairly unusual in the public sector up until this year. They are something that are featuring very heavily across the public sector this year because of the uncertainty that COVID-19 has brought into the environment for all of us. To reassure the panel, it is our expectation that the majority of councils and wider public sector bodies will have an emphasis of matter paragraph in their independent auditor's report this year, and it is a sign of where we are right now. So I was maybe going to pause there for a wee second if there was anything specific on emphasis of matter, and again I'll just slight pause and then I'll just move on to go through the report in the kind of more logical order. So on page 18, as I said, unqualified audit opinion. We do have an emphasis of matter, and it is particularly about the uncertainty in the property valuations as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's not wider uncertainty, it is very much focused in that area. And as we go through the annual audit report, you will see there were other areas of that uncertainty that we considered but did not feel they were significant enough to require an emphasis of matter paragraph. So we do talk about the significant findings from the audit in accordance with IS 260, and they are included within our annual audit report. It will be on the Audit Scotland website in due course, but it's not there yet because we have to go through this process first before it's approved, and then it will be published on the Audit Scotland website. There is one unadjusted misstatement within the audited accounts that is for £0.3 million, and it was in relation to a reevaluation adjustment in non-current assets. It's only slightly above our clearly trivial amount, which requires us to draw it to your attention, but just for that understanding that it was only just above the clearly trivial threshold that we set for the accounts. Similarly to the trusts, I now look for confirmation, the Audit and Scrutiny panel, in relation to the audit of the council, that there are no instances of actual suspected or alleged fraud or any events that the panel would like to draw to my attention, or any risks in terms of non-compliance with laws and regulations. Again, slight pause, and happy to move forward on that basis. One thing I just wanted, in case anyone had noticed, in relation to the letter of representation, which is detailed in Appendix 8, as I scroll down to see what page of that, which starts on page 24, but it's actually on page, still scrolling, 27. The final point in the letter of representation in relation to common good, not sure anyone would have noticed, but the letter of representation that was in the previous agenda item, that point has changed. It changed because I was not aware of the exercise that the council has recently undertaken to identify common good assets. So just to reassure the panel that I am aware of the change of wording, it was discussed with me before being drafted, and I have no issues with. That is all that I was going to say in the covering letter. So convener, if you're happy. Oh, in fact, that's the next agenda item is the annual audit report. So I will stop there. Sorry, convener. Getting ahead of myself.
Thank you very much, Carol. Do we have any further comments or questions in relation to agenda item 3? Because if not, I would be keen just to move straight on to agenda item 4 to allow Carol to continue. Is everyone okay with that?
Carol's not answered my question about the misstatement. Did you put anything in the Audit Scotland website?
So the process that for our reports are that they go through the council's governance processes first. The accounts are then signed, then the annual report is issued in final at that point, and then it will be put on the Audit Scotland website. So all of our outputs are on the Audit Scotland website, but the significant findings from the audit I will come on to talk to in the next agenda item because they are contained within the annual report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hume. Carol, if I could just get you to continue, please, that would be on agenda item 4, which is the external audit, and that's the annual audit report 2019-2020. Thank you.
Convener, Councillor Valentine had indicated on the chat I wish to come in on agenda item 3 before you moved on.
I do apologise, Councillor Valentine, sorry about that.
Carol just referenced it there at the end. There's page 12, common good, and page 27, the common good. The 2 letters from the Section 95 officer, and they're completely different. Council, in page 12, common good, council's in process of finalising the common good register, and it's published this on the website, and it has. And on the letter 14 days later, common good, I am not aware of any common good assets held by North Lanarkshire. Can I have a bit more clarification about that, please?
Yeah,
Carol, did you pick that up okay? Sorry, Councillor Valentine, your microphone doesn't seem to be picking up sound very well.
I think I picked up enough. So it's basically about the change in the 2 different letters of representation for the common goods. So that was entirely my fault. In previous years, the council had not identified any common good assets, but that they do an exercise when they are disposing assets to check if there is any common good lien in relation to the assets that would impact on their disposal. I included that wording this year, and then it was drawn to my attention that the council have done an exercise. So there are assets now, they're on the council's website. There's a list of assets that they have identified that are potential common good assets, but work is still ongoing to confirm that. So there's no impact on the accounts for this, but it was literally just a change to the wording, which the council drew to my attention after I had issued the letter for the papers. I decided it wasn't worth recalling the papers, and I would just explain it at the meeting. So I am entirely content with the different wording, but I apologise if it is confusing.
Councillor Valentine, are you looking for a supplementary? Is that okay? Thank you very much. Councillor Burrows is trying to join the meeting as well, but he's having connectivity issues, so hopefully he will be able to join us shortly. But Carol, if there's no further questions from members, Carol, can I just get you to continue with agenda item 4, please? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm enjoying thumbs up when I see them. That's always a good way to communicate. In going through the annual audit report, I tend not to start at the key messages, which might seem a bit odd, but I find it gets quite repetitive if I do, because they flow out of the text within the report. So the first thing that I would like to just refer to is on page 41 of the agenda pack, which is paragraph 1, which just confirms that this report draws together the findings from all of our work on the council that's taken place this year. So that is, there's a lot of work that's done on the audit of the accounts, but it also picks up on the work that we reported in early September in relation to the council systems and on the quality arrangements, and also in relation to the progress on implementing the recommendations from the Best Value Assurance report. And we also generally, as we do every year, we pick up on the wider dimensions of the public sector audit that are contained in Exhibit 1, and there, that's the terminology you'll all be familiar with from our annual reports. The next thing I was just going to mention was in paragraph 9, where we just confirm that we comply with the Financial Reporting Council's ethical standards, and just to confirm that we haven't undertaken any non-audit related services, and therefore the audit fee remains unchanged from that was presented in the annual audit plan. And also just to confirm that we're not aware of any relationships that could compromise our objectivity or independence. So part one of the report deals with the accounts. As I mentioned in the covering letter, our audit opinion on the accounts are unmodified, but that we have an emphasis of matter in relation to the uncertainty in property valuations. It's important to note that what the emphasis of matter paragraph does is it simply points to the disclosures that are in the accounts that have been made by the council. We are content with the disclosures. We believe they are entirely accurate, and all we are doing as the auditor is drawing the reader's attention to them. At paragraph 14 through to 17, we really just pick up on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the audit of the annual accounts. It is worth me pointing out, I suppose more than anything else, that the council did publish the unaudited accounts by the original deadline, the 30th of June, which was a significant achievement. Throughout the audit process, there has been really good engagement and discussion between the audit team and staff, and without them we wouldn't be here, to be honest, at this point. So, you know, I do appreciate everything that has gone in to getting us to this point. And also just to note that we received good working papers to help the audit, but also that we did have to rely on council staff more than we would in any normal year. So it was at a time when council staff were dealing with significant other pressures as well. So again, there was a lot going on, and I think it's worth noting that the progress that was made and the relationship with finance that enabled it to go ahead. As you'll know, there is a requirement to advertise the unaudited accounts, and we just confirmed paragraph 18 that we didn't receive any objections to the accounts. Moving down at paragraph 22 in Exhibit 2, our materiality levels, again, that were outlined in our annual audit plan, remained unchanged. There was nothing that occurred that resulted in us having to change our audit approach in relation to that. And that our audit work addressed the risks of material misstatement that we identified in our audit plan. The next section, which is really about Exhibit 4, picks up on the point that I was the question earlier about the significant findings from the audit. They are captured in Exhibit 4, and these flow directly from what the auditing standards require us to draw to your attention as those charged with governance for the council. So the first issue, as I feel I've already mentioned it multiple times, is the property valuations and the uncertainty that COVID-19 has caused. Because the council has a rolling programme of asset valuations, although the asset valuer hadn't specifically drawn attention to uncertainty, that was partly because of the timing of the review and also partly because of the classes of asset that were subject to revaluation. The uncertainty still exists in the wider portfolio, and as we note in that first point, the auditors of North Lanarkshire Properties LLP also had an emphasis of matter paragraph in relation to the property and on that audit. So it's something that is featuring across the public sector, and it's the emphasis of matter paragraph is really just drawing attention to the unusual nature this year of this within the accounts. The second point relates to going concern of group bodies. Obviously, in this environment, it's significant focus for the external auditors of a number of the group bodies, and we engaged with them throughout the audit process. The auditors of Mayors Scotland LLP have included an emphasis of matter paragraph in relation to going concern uncertainty. We believe this is appropriately disclosed within the accounts, and there was nothing else in relation to our audit response that was required for that. Third point is about pension scheme property valuations. Similarly, the unaudited accounts of Strathclyde pension funds have a material valuation uncertainty disclosure about the fund's property portfolio. We assessed what that would mean for the council in terms of their share, and we again noted that it was appropriately disclosed within the accounts, but we didn't feel it was significant to require us to draw it to the attention within our independent auditor's report. I don't know if you want me to pause for any questions on emphasis of matter, or if you want me just to continue.
Do we have any questions at this point, or are we happy for Carol to continue? I'll take silence as a continuation, Carol, thank you.
Chair, it's Jim here. Did you see my email?
Yes.
Claire asked us to send the questions in writing.
Yes.
Now, I've sent a few in. If they're not responded to today, that's fine. Perhaps you could make a decision on whether when the response comes, it goes to all members or just me.
Yes, so what happened was, because there was a little bit of uncertainty as to whether Elaine would be on the call or not today, Councillor Hume, I think Carol's going to answer the questions that fall within her remit, and I think Fiona and Veronica are able to pick up the other aspects of your questions. So we'll try and get as much done today as possible, but anything that you don't think has been answered in depth enough, we can certainly get that out in writing to you and other members, if that would be all right.
Okay, so you're not dealing with them when they occur within the report, then just at the end or something?
Carol, what would you like? What would be best for you?
So I think in going through the report, I will be addressing some of them, but I'm happy to come back to them if you don't feel they've been addressed in sufficient detail. I know one of your questions was on emphasis of matter paragraphs. So if there's more that you would like from me in relation to that at the moment, I'm happy to do it, or I'm happy to pick it up at the end.
I would prefer that. However, if as I said in the email, if you want to send answers to me, that'd be fine as well. I don't want to take up time if others don't want to listen to the answers.
Well, I don't think it's that at all, Councillor Hume. I mean, you did say within your email you wanted the answers to be brief. So, I mean, I think Carol is trying to give brief answers to certain aspects of your questions going forward. But certainly, if you want more in-depth answers, I think it might be better if we put that out in writing to all members. Would that be acceptable moving forward?
Yes. So Carol will give her update on the items within the report, and then we'll go back to the questions. Is that right? And see if I think they've been covered.
Yes, that would be great. Right. Ken, you were looking to come in quickly. Sorry, Carol, and then I'll let you back in.
Yeah, it's just in reference to the emphasis of matter. I think we obviously need to be, and I understand entirely why elected members would be interested in that. I think we just need to be conscious of Carol's role in that area. As she's explained, one of the assessments she will make is about the extent to which uncertainties are appropriately disclosed in the accounts. And then I think she said on a number of occasions she's content with that in relation to some of the matters that are being flagged up. Clearly, those uncertainties, many of them continue, many of them it's uncertain as to when they will be clarified. But obviously, Elaine through the Financial Solutions team will be reflecting on a number of those uncertainties and looking to make sure those are addressed in terms of updates that elected members get on the kind of current and future financial position of the council. So I think I think we just need to be mindful that Carol's role is to effectively assess the impact and look at the disclosure and obviously the resolution of those uncertainties and acting and taking future decisions once those are clarified falls to the council.
Thanks, Ken. That's really helpful. Carol, sorry about that. If we can continue, that would be great. Thank you.
No problem at all. So the next issue, which I think was one of the questions, was in relation to the cloud liability within the pension valuations. You might recall that actually happened last year as well, and there was a judgment in relation to this case, which resulted in a move in the pension liability last year. The kind of detail behind this year is that how that was rectified last year, now with a bit more detail and clarity, they actually has realised that it was probably more onerous in its assumption. What the council did was they received a revised pension IS 19 report, which enabled them to adjust the pension liability. So it was a 14.6 million decrease in pension liability as a result of that change in how they would rectify the cloud issue within the pension scheme. Just to confirm, that adjustment has been processed in the accounts. I think in the question that was emailed, it may have felt as if that was a 14.9 million unadjusted error. To be absolutely clear, the 14.6 million has been adjusted within the accounts and is now correctly represented in the audited accounts that will be in front of you in the next agenda item. Item 5 is really just about non-current asset accounting, and it was a collection of relatively minor issues in this area, but it just felt that with taking them together, there was value in a recommendation just to ensure that non-current asset accounting got a bit of a focus forward for next year. So there's nothing in the detail of that I would feel would be specific enough to draw to your attention. It includes the 0.3 million understatement on the revaluation that was mentioned in the covering letter, and that is the only unadjusted error in the accounts. Item 6, which is the final item, was just about the accounting for one of the capital grants. It was £2 million, and just to confirm that has been adjusted in the accounts. The final thing I would say in that section is just at paragraph 28, and just to kind of note that the council has made good progress in implementing our prior year audit recommendations, and you'll see that from the appendix that details them. That's the end of the accounts section, so we're less technical hopefully moving forward. Part 2 picks up on financial management, and we conclude, as we have in previous years, that the financial monitoring arrangements within the council are good. The council achieved an underspend of 2.4 million in 1920, despite some additional costs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, the council has a track record of delivering savings, and we note and welcome the development of a 3-year savings plan and the additional stability that can provide for the council moving forward. That takes me down to paragraph 34, and it's in relation to the integration scheme, and it just notes that the revised integration scheme wasn't fully implemented at the year end. We have a recommendation in relation to that, but you'll note from the response to the recommendation that we have been assured that is now in place. Because of the timing, we haven't done the audit work to confirm that, but officers have given us that reassurance in relation to that recommendation. The next thing I was just going to mention is on page 52, and it's paragraph 42 onwards, and it was really just to note, as Ken has mentioned, you know, the ongoing uncertainty in relation to COVID-19, and we just note that in relation to capital programme, the community investment fund and what that might mean, and just the wider uncertainty that the council now operates under. Paragraph 45 onwards, we talk about the financial systems and that the controls were generally operating effectively. We know about the payroll verification, which actually we mentioned in our management report, which came to yourselves in September. So because this report sweeps up all of our work, we repeat it here, and we have a recommendation to ensure that a robust payroll validation process is introduced. And again, we welcome the response from officers and the progress that's been made in that area. On financial sustainability, we note the kind of moving feast a little bit, that is the 2021 financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We note that it could be significant, and the recent forecasts is projecting a deficit of 11.9 million. I'm saying recent forecast, it may now have changed, to be honest. Fiona and Veronica would be better placed than me. That's what it was at the point of writing the report. We tried to capture that movement in paragraph 49 to show how it has changed from between August and October. and how the council are dealing with that ongoing change. Which brings me to an apology, because on page 55 of your papers, there's a formatting issue at the top of the page, but there's also a couple of figures that I didn't update and are wrong. So in paragraph 51, we note the general fund reserve has increased to over 62 million, but the reference in the middle to 6.6 million to support one-off costs should actually be 3 million. So I apologise for that, and I will correct that in the final version. And also at the bottom of the page, where we note that the council has good medium-term financial plan, we note the envisaged funding gap. We reference firstly to the wrong paragraph, because it should be 49 and not 45. And also we talk about the 22 million, which, as I said, was the August update on the impact of COVID-19. That should be 11.9 million to tie into with the paragraph that I mentioned earlier. So again, I will update that. All of that happened on the one page. I don't know what happened on that page when I was drafting it, so apologies to the governance and transparency. Overall governance arrangements are appropriate. They are that's consistent with our views, what our views have been the time of our audit appointment. But what we know is that they have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we just go through a bit of that detail on page 57. We're not saying we have concerns about it, it's just different. As we know, operating in this environment, it just brings different challenges. The council is open and transparent in the way it conducts its business, and we also note that the standards of conduct and arrangements for prevention and detection of fraud are appropriate, and that the council has taken appropriate steps to progress the NFI matches. Final thing I think in that section is really just to pick up on culture, sport and leisure services being insourced, and just telling a little bit of the story in relation to that decision. Finally, part 5 picks up on base value, and the majority of this work was actually captured in our management report in September. So it really just picks up on the good progress that has been made in relation to the value assurance report that was published last year, and also that the council has established the quality arrangements and reporting in place. At paragraph 77, which is on page 63 of the pack, we just note the emergence of COVID-19 and what impact that is having for the performance measures of the council and performance overall. It's really just to note that for the panel. It's something obviously we'll pick up as things progress. At the point of drafting this, it's very early to see the impact of COVID on services, but it was just worth drawing it to your attention. That brings us on to Appendix 1, which is the action plan with the 3 recommendations that I previously mentioned, but also follows up the prior year recommendations and shows the progress that's been made on them. Appendix 2 is the risk that we identified in our annual audit plan, and the final paragraph includes the work that we have done to satisfy ourselves in these areas, and also the conclusion from that work. And Appendix 3 is just some detail of the national performance reports that have been issued during the year that may be of interest. So hopefully that's answered some of the questions, but I'm happy to take any questions that others may have.
That's great, Carol. Thank you so much. I just want to echo your comments in relation to the hard work of our council staff, yet again managing to meet guidelines against all odds during this really difficult time. So thank you to each and every person that was involved in pulling those accounts together to get them to Audit Scotland in time. Do we have any comments or questions? Councillor Hume, you want to come in first, because I know you did have a list of questions within your emails, and it's just to maybe see if we can iron out some of those answers for you before we get the rest of them in writing to members of the panel.
I'm having trouble getting my questions in relation to the sections. The questions were raised mostly for Elaine, actually, rather than Carol, because I think Carol's comments are are relevant for external auditors. I think, as Ken said, members need to know a different level of detail and a different level of content to what Carol needs to include in the annual accounts.
We do have Veronica and Fiona, Jim, here if there's anything in particular.
Well, my first question relates to uncorrected misstatements, as mentioned several times. Carol gave an explanation of why this is the first time we're seeing them. But because it's the first time, I've got a figure of 14.9 million. A brief, I think, so this is why I'm saying, I don't know, I want an explanation of the type items involved in this. And if Ken's saying that it's not relevant for the accounts, but the council is aware that members will need to be updated on these things in more detail at some subsequent date, then that's fine for me. Is that what you said, Ken?
It's not quite what I said, but I think, I mean, I'm sure finance colleagues can give some commentary on the detailed aspects that comprise the totals. But I think it's from an internal audit perspective, I think it's important to recognise the significant judgments that are made in preparing the accounts, and that I'm sure Carol wouldn't put it quite as bluntly as this, but to some extent, when you're auditing a set of accounts, you'd be surprised if you didn't come across some misstatements. Then a dialogue takes place between those preparing the accounts and the auditors as to whether or not those misstatements should be corrected prior to the accounts being audited. And clearly, things like materiality and significance are important considerations in that. But I'm sure finance colleagues can probably give you a little bit of detail in terms of some of the areas that were identified and adjusted.
I don't know, perhaps one or two to let us know what a typical item of misstatement would be, and then we can get more information later.
Veronica, Fiona?
I was going to say, do you want me to come in on? So you'd mentioned the 14.9 million in particular. The bulk of that is one specific item. I know Carol had mentioned the 0.3 million revaluation that remains unadjusted. But 14.6 million of that is in relation to pension valuations. Last year there was a legal challenge that relates to all public sector pensions, and the challenge had been through Supreme Court and was upheld. So at that point, the actuaries had to put in estimates of the cost of rectifying that. But at the time, the government hadn't, there wasn't any indication on actually how that was going to be rectified. So there was an element of estimate in there. The actuarial report we received for the draft accounts had those same estimates and same assumptions in as had been in last year's audited accounts. However, during the course, I think it was June or July time, but during the course of the audit, that guidance as to what the proposed change to the scheme was going to be was released, and we've been given notification that actually the assumptions that they had previously made were too high. So we obtained a revised actuarial report, which showed a 14.6 million reduction from the figures that were included in the unaudited accounts. Once we had received that report, we then made changes in the accounts. So there's a 14.6 million change between audited and unaudited, or sorry, the other way around, in relation to that item, but that has been corrected. So although there is, it is a large change, that's not unadjusted. We have made that change and the audited accounts reflect that. It's on your email, you'd also asked for a brief explanation of that in relation to the budget projections. This doesn't actually have any impact on our budget projections. Our income statement is prepared on proper accounting practice, so those actuarial assumptions are included in our income statement. However, there's a number of statutory adjustments that are made to the accounts that reverse the impact of that out from our general fund. So it doesn't actually have any impact on general fund, and therefore it doesn't have any impact on us in budgeting terms. I hope that answers that question a bit more.
It doesn't. It's too technical. It's too accountancy terms. It sounds to me like there's two uncorrected misstatements, one for 14.6 and one for 300, which Carol felt she had to mention because it was above the threshold. So there's you've mentioned two items, so there's two uncorrected misstatements. If that's not the case, then that's what I took from your explanation. In terms of your other thing about the value, we're not going to get the right level of discussion at this meeting. We'll need to take it outside. But how were we able to put 2 million for the McLeod judgment into the budget savings proposals? But it was according to you. I don't understand what you're saying, but what you were saying was it doesn't affect the finances of the council. And it sounded to me like the 14.6 million was put into reserves to cover the cost of this claim, and then it was actually reduced. But the 14.6 million still had to exist somewhere. And in fact, the 2 million, because the McLeod judgment was 80% likely to go our way, we were able to find 2 million to put into budget savings. So I don't understand that, but I don't want to get into more detail here, frankly.
I'm not sure on the 2 million. I need to go back to you on that. I'm not aware of anything to do with that. But in terms of the uncorrected misstatements, that 14.6 isn't uncorrected. That has been corrected in the audited accounts. So it's just the remaining 0.3 million. But what I can do is try to kind of prepare a briefing that explains it a bit better, and it's maybe easier to see once you have time to digest, because like you say, it is quite technical.
Yeah, suitable for members rather than accountants, please, Fiona.
That's fine, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Ken, you were wanting to come in on the pension valuation issue.
I'll probably just to reiterate, I think that it's quite a complex issue to kind of explain in layman's terms. There's clearly two different strands here. One is accounting the annual charge for pension costs, which is reflected in the annual accounts, and then there's the consideration of the council's future pension costs and percentage of pay bill that needs to be put aside, and which is obviously reflected in the account. So I agree with Councillor Hume's summation there at the end that that second part's probably not particularly relevant for this meeting, but clearly I can understand why members would be acutely interested in it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ken, and Councillor Hume will make sure that briefing note is circulated to all members, and if we can try and make it as member friendly as possible, as you say, Councillor Hume, that would be very helpful. Do we have any other comments or questions moving on to other points? Councillor Hume, are you wanting?
Yeah, I've still got a number of questions, but like I just wanted someone to say we understand that members need more information. Like emphasis on matter for MERS, the external auditors could care less about that. But frankly, members need to be briefed quite fully on that and the impact on MERS feeling it was significant enough to put an emphasis of matter statement into their reporting. We need a lot more detail in that, and I just want someone to say it'll either come back to audit and scrutiny, or it'll be at some other committee meeting where members were given an update on why MERS felt the need to do this and impact on future trading and things like that. That's where I was coming from that.
Okay, Councillor Hume, I can bring Ken in just now in terms of the risk perspective on that, if you want to hear from Ken.
Any information is welcome, yeah.
Okay, Ken, thank you.
The answer to that question is normally no. Nobody wants to hear from me. Yeah, I mean, just to say, I mean, clearly, many commercial companies have faced considerable uncertainty given the current circumstances that we're going through. So, external auditors placing, uncertainties that are in going concern and emphasis of matter paragraphs is not unusual. I would say that kind of supplier continuity and the future of some of our key suppliers are an integral part of services' own risk management arrangements. And clearly, as I think was referenced at the last panel meeting, the Gold Resilience Group in particular had significant attention paid to the financial viability of key suppliers as part of their considerations during the period at which the emergency was at its highest. So this is an area that I think relevant services are very sensitive to. They will be working with those suppliers in appropriate ways to ensure that they have sufficient visibility and assurance where that can be obtained about the potential viability of suppliers who deliver key services to the council, and in particular with kind of those kind of PP joint ventures and key alios. There are formal governance arrangements around that codify how we engage with that in terms of monitoring their financial and other performance, and deal with matters relating to kind of key risks, of which continuity is clearly one.
Thank you very much, Ken. Councillor Hume, I'll let you back in a second, but I see we're now joined by Elaine and Councillor Burrows. So good afternoon both. Thank you very much for coming on. Councillor Hume, are you wanting to come back in the supplementary?
Again, the questions I had, I just wanted information on where we would get more information about it, like assets written off. A very brief explanation of that for me or for some other committee. One general question for Carol, if you don't mind, and you might have covered it briefly, but in previous years since you've started doing this, there's been comments and findings about you going beyond the accounts and looking at other matters within the council, and you found actually quite a few things where you felt things weren't being handled quite the way they should be. And I know from this time that there were 3 residual ones that 2 of which were done and payroll wasn't still being handled properly. Was it a deliberate, because of the restrictions, was it a deliberate action on your part that you didn't do further investigations apart from the way you normally do apart from the accounts?
So our work this year has been consistent with previous years. So we audit the controls, and where we find weaknesses in the controls, we determine other ways that we can get our assurance. So what the weaknesses in payroll mean for us as auditors is that we can't rely on that control, and therefore we have to extend our detailed testing, so our substantive testing going into individual transactions and looking at the detail of it to enable us to gain sufficient assurance for our opinion on the accounts. So it's just a different way to get your assurance, but the weakness in terms of the payroll control is something that we have reported on the last couple of years, and we are pleased to note the response in terms of the introduction of a positive validation exercise going forward, and that would really strengthen that control environment around the payroll system.
Sorry, I don't think that answered my question. You went previous years. You went beyond the annual accounts in a number of areas to identify issues and found them. This isn't the right mechanism for dealing with things like this stuff, where we're not quite sure. Well, I'm not quite sure what's being said. So I'll maybe take that up later as well. Ken, you'll see in my email that I said you'd identified payroll as an issue in the past, and it clearly still. Carol says some work's being done, but you found that it's been on the go for some time, and external auditors are still finding issues with it. So we need an update on that as well. Sorry, in terms of other questions that I had in the email, the SIF review, when will that be completed? And there was another emphasis of matter for the property valuation, as Carol had said, and I would like that included in a further explanation in more detail for members. I think that's all I've got for this section.
Okay.
So Frankly, I don't think it's constructive discussing it just now. I see Elaine's back, but she's missed the start. So if Elaine and the team could look at maybe Ken as well, could look at the questions and get back to me or other members briefly, and probably briefly would answer most of the questions. And if it doesn't, we can drill down a bit later on.
Okay, Councillor Hume, I was going to suggest that. I think it's better it would take, because the level of detail you're looking for, I think you're right. I don't think we're going to get that ironed out today during today's meeting. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that is looked at via Elaine, Ken, and if there's any further drilling down, as you say, then we can do that as members. But I think it would be useful, given the fact that we have had the initial discussions during today's meeting, that all members receive a copy of the responses to your answers, because you did include all members of the Audit and Scrutiny panel within the initial correspondence. So if you're okay with that, then we'll move on just now, but we'll make sure we'll get those answered for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments or questions in relation to agenda item 4? Any further comments, questions? No, I will take the silence as we're all good to go. Okay, so if members are content, we'll note this. We'll note agenda item 4, and we'll move on to the final agenda item today, which is agenda item 5, and it's the annual accounts 2019-2020 audited. And Elaine, I see you're back. Are you ready to take agenda item 5?
Veronica's going to take item 5, if that's okay.
Absolutely not a problem at all. Veronica, if I could hand over to you, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you fine, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Apologies, everyone. I'm on via my phone, so I can't actually see you. So the purpose of this report is to present to the panel the 2019-20 audited annual accounts and seek approval for the final accounts to be signed off. The draft accounts were presented to you all in September last month, highlighting the key messages reported through the management commentary, and I can confirm that the headline figures in relation to general fund and HRA remain unchanged following the audit. I don't intend in going any further on that. Carol's already taken us through the audit report and identified that there have been some changes to the account. And normally at this stage I would invite you to ask questions. I'm not sure how you want to do this, Councillor, whom you've provided your questions to us, and I'm happy to provide a full written response to all of them. Otherwise, I seek for members to approve the accounts to be signed off.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Councillor Hume, sorry, I'll bring you in first. Is there anything that you're wanting to discuss just now, or are you happy with the written response suggestion that Veronica's highlighted?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's great, thank you very much. Do we have any further comments or questions arising just now that any member would like to raise? No, okay. Are we happy to approve the annual account? Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you very much, everyone, for your patience. I know it was a bit more trying today with the fact that they had important announcements and obviously officers having to attend various other meetings, but thank you very much for being with us. Carol, again, thank you very much for your time and for talking to both of the reports, agenda item 3 and 4 today. And just to finalise, thank you very much, members, for your attendance. Thank you.